All right. Hi, everybody. We are in Masechet Eruvin, Daf Kaf Gimel 23. We have two Mishnayot today. The first one is whether when you have corner brackets around a well, can you use that for a well and a cistern also, or only a well? And can it be public, or it can definitely be public, but can it be a private one also? This we discussed earlier, but here is the main place that is the Mishnah. And then the second Mishnah is going to be about the size and shape of a karpef. That's an important key term. That means an enclosed area not used for domestic use. In other words, you don't live there, animals don't live there, but used for storage, would be also like a vegetable garden, a place that you don't walk normally. And so on that Mishnah, we'll have three subtopics. First of all, just a literary analysis of the word ve'od in the Mishnayot, which is very interesting, where it's used and where it's not. Then we're going to figure out how to calculate the square root of 5,000, which is an irrational number. We'll see how the Talmud deals with that. And then when you have land that's mixed use, some of it is used for is residential, and some of it is not, as a vegetable garden, then what status do you give it? Those are the topics. So we start right with the Mishnah. Echad bod harabim, ubed harabim, ubed hayachid, osin lahen pasin. Aval lebod hayachid, osin lo mechisa gabo asarat tefachim, divrei Rabbi Akiva. Okay, good. So once again, we're talking about something with, I don't have a picture right here. Okay, something with, you have a well in the middle, and you have corners. You don't have to put full walls, but rather simply corner brackets. So according to the Rabbi Akiva, you can use that in 3 out of 4 cases. If it belongs to the public, right, lots of people go there, then it's always allowed. And if it's a well of spring water, that also is always allowed. But there is one case in which it's not allowed, and that's if it's a cistern of collected water and it's private, made for private use only. There you have to make walls that are 10 tefachim high, right, all around. Why? What's the reason for this? As we saw, if it's a well, it has water all the time. If it's a cistern, it may run out of water, right? It rains in the rainy season. By the summer, it runs out of water. If it's empty, then you're not allowed to use this leniency of having the corner brackets anymore. And so then you're going to come to carry in that area even when there is no water there. So that's the problem with cistern water. Public is always better, because as long as it's public there, if it would run out, they would remind each other, hey, you don't carry it here. But if it's private, just only you use it, no one's going to be there to remind you. So according to the Rabbi Akiva, as long as you have either or, it's okay. But if you have nothing, right, if it's private and it's cistern, it's going to run out of water, and no one's going to remind you, then you can't use it. You have to use the other. You have to use regular walls. Okay, that's the first opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba is more mahmir. He says, "En osin pasin ella lebe'ed harabim bilvad." Out of the 4 cases, only one is allowed, according to him. V'lishad osin hagora gaboa asara tefachim. For any of the other cases, if it's either private or it's a cistern or both, then you have to put up a rope that would be 10 tefachim high. See, that's a slightly different language than mechisa. It sounds like chagora. It sounds like just the simple rope that only goes horizontal. 3 ropes that would be lavud to each other, which is a low-level mechisa, and seems that's what he would mean. Although the Rishonim try to struggle to figure out why would it be okay here. Does it really mean that? It's just an example. Okay, but it is different language. All right, that's what the Mishnah says. Let's figure out what the halacha is. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel. Halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. In other words, we're machmir. Only one of these cases are we allowed to use it. We saw so far a lot of restrictions regarding this. This right, only used for animals unless it's there's no way to get down, then you can climb down, right? So this is not the most useful. I don't know if anybody uses this anywhere today. I don't think so. Okay, so Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel. Okay, also in the name of the same lineage of rabbis, in the name of Shemuel, say Lo hutru paseh biraot ela lebe'er mayim hayim bilvad. You can only use it for or for spring water. So now this would seem to be redundant. You just told me that halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, who says it has to be spring water and it has to be private. So now you're telling me it has to be spring water. I know that already. You just said halacha is like him. So why are you telling me both of these things? Well, siricha, I do need both of them. Diash me'ainan halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, hava amina de rabim. If you just told me that halacha is like Yehuda ben Baba, I would have thought maybe you mean halacha is like him with regard to that it has to be public but not private. So maybe only that aspect, because he has two things to say. But it would I would think it would work for a cistern. So that's why I want to be more explicit even and say halacha is like him for that second halacha as well.
Yes, but they mentioned that it's spring water. So why would you think it's a cistern?
Why would you think? Maybe he means because we have Rabbi Akiva that says 3 out of the 4 are good, and Rabbi Akiva says only 1 out of the 4 is good. So there's no in-between opinion, right? So maybe you would think that you mean halacha like him. Maybe you'd want to make a compromise between them, something like that. Okay. And why do you need the second halacha? So to tell you that halacha is not like Rabbi Akiva, that it has to be and it has to be spring water. Rabbi Akiva said if it's public cistern, that would be okay. So that's why, in order to make it clear that it's the extreme opinion that is halacha, and not any of the in-between cases, that's why kamash malan de lo trupase berot ela leber mayim hayim. If you only told me the second one, right, I would have thought that maybe it doesn't matter if it's public or private, right? That statement is not clear at all. So therefore, we have both statements, and that's what it comes to teach us. All right, good. I mean, historically, I guess you could say that Shmuel, maybe on different occasions, one time he said in this formulation, one time he said it in a different formulation, but the formulations are not the same as each other and different in content. So this way we're able to harmonize them and also show that we need both to make it extra clear. All right, so that's all for that Mishnah. And now we go to the second Mishnah, which is about the size and shape of a karpef. This Mishnah is somewhat complex, has many different opinions. So let's try to keep them all straight. Ve'od amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. Okay, Od Amar. Why say Od Amar? Because he's the one that spoke in the previous one. He was Mahmir and said only 1 out of the 4 cases. Now he's saying, furthermore, the Talmud will ask about this word. Hagina v'hakarpef shen shib'im amma v'shirayim al shivim shama amma v'shirayim hamukafot gader gavoa 10 tefachim metaltelin betocha. ובלבד שיהיה בה שומרה או בית דירה או שתהא סמוכה לעיר. Okay, so you have a garden or a karpef, another courtyard used for storage. So if normally something that's courtyards, where people walk, where people live, that can be as big as you want. But these things, because they're not residential use, have a limit. The limit is 70 and a bit, 70 and change by 70 and change. Where did we get that? Well, what's 70 times 7? Times 70?
14.
Times, not plus. Right? It's almost 5,000. Okay, so we're going to see this, that the size, the biggest size of karpef is 5,000 square amot, which we learned from the Mishkan, which was 50 by 100. And so if you, that's in a rectangle, it's 50 by 100. If you would make it a square, 5,000 amot in a square shape is 70 2/3 times by 70, actually 70.71 times 70.71. You can do the math, but it's irrational. So even that is a little bit off. Okay, but anyway, that's where we get this number. If it would be square, then that's the biggest it could be. It has to have partitions all around, 10 tefachim high, and it also has to have a watchman's booth or some kind of dwelling place, or be near the city. It has to have some connection with a place where a person would be. It's still not considered residential because a watchman's booth is not a place where you sleep, or even if you sleep there, it's not a place that you reside in. You're only there because you want to watch over. Right? It's only there for the purpose of what is outside, it's not important in and of itself. And so you need all of these requirements in order to be able to carry in a gina or kadpef. That's the first opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Rabbi Yehudai, that's Rabbi Yehuda bar Eli, the fourth generation. Tana Omer, afilu en ba ela bor v'siach u'ma'ara v'taltelin betocha. Says you don't need a guard tower or watchtower or dwelling place, even if it only has a cistern or a ditch or a cave, right? Something that access to water. That also makes it allowed. Okay, good. He's a little bit more lenient. Rabbi Akiva is even more lenient. He says, interesting, the previous Mishnah also he was more lenient. Afilu en ba ahat mikol elu metartelin betocha. Ulbad sheyeh ba 70 amma v'shirayim al 70 amma v'shirayim. Even if it doesn't have anything in it, not any of these structures, not a guard tower, not a well, right? It's okay, as long as it has a size of 70 and change, mas times by 70 amma and change. Okay, good. You see how this is repetitive? Right, I mean, 70, everybody agreed it has to be that size, 70 by 70. Like, why does it have to say ubilvad? But it has to be, as if anyone disagrees. Yeah, there's no argument about this part of it. He could have just said, betocha, period, and you would have, well, maybe you would have said, he's so lenient on this thing, maybe he would have been lenient on the size also, to tell you that not so. Okay, so the Talmud is going to discuss all of these things about that regarding that repetition. For our own purposes, right, here's something to notice. Rabbi Akiva is a third generation Tana. He is the teacher of Rabbi Yehuda. So this is very strange that it quotes Rabbi Yehuda first and then Rabbi Akiva after, right? So it's not in chronological order. So which means that Rabbi Akiva could not be responding to Rabbi Yehuda, right? That's historically that wouldn't happen. So it could be that the Mishnah's editor, the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, wants to put it in order of the most machmir medium to most mekel, right? But this formulation is not likely to be the original formulation of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva could have said something like, you don't need however he formulated it as an independent sentence. And once it's placed in the Mishnah, it's formulated in the way that is so that it's responding to the Yehuda, which makes more sense, right? Every time we quote a Tanakh, doesn't mean we're quoting him word for word, we're quoting the content of his opinion. And anyway, that could explain why this doubling, why it says, maybe as an independent statement, that made sense, right? And only when it's put into the Mishnah, then it's redundant. Okay, I'm trying to give a kind of historical reconstruction explanation, but you'll see the Talmud will ask all these questions and explain everything. Okay, good. So that's all that is about what has to be inside there. And now the shape of it. Rabbi Eliezer omer, im hayita orka yater al rochba, afilu amma achat en metaltelin betocha. If the length is bigger than the width, even by 1 amma, you cannot carry. It has to be exactly square. Okay, that's interesting. Now, Rabbi Yehuda omer, afilu orka pi shenayim berochba metaltelin betocha. No, even if it's twice as long as it is wide, that's still okay, right? It sounds like not more than that. It can't be just like 1 amma by 5,000 would not be okay, right? But it can be rectangle up to that ratio. Okay, so that's a machloket there. Amar Rabbi Eli, Shamati me Rabbi Eliezer, afilu hi kebet kor. He says, I heard in the name of, it says Elazar. It says that in the printed edition, but it has to be Rabbi Eliezer. It's quoted later as Rabbi Eliezer, and the manuscripts have that. So the same Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanas, the sage who always quotes old traditions. He says it doesn't even have to be 70 by 70. It can even be as big as a bet kor, which is 30 times the size of a bet seah. So no, there's 15 times the amount that everyone else said. So that's Rabbi Eli heard this in the name of Rabbi Elazar. So although here Rabbi Eliezer, although here Rabbi Eliezer is quoted as saying has to be equal, a square, it doesn't say exactly how big. And we were assuming 70 by 70. But here, Rabbi Eli is saying, I heard him say it can be even bigger. And another thing I heard in his name, וכן שמעתי ממנו, אנשי חסר ששכח אחד מהן ולא ערב, ביתו אסור מלהכניס ולהוסיף לו, אבל להם מותר. generally, if you have many houses, let's say you have 5 houses open to a courtyard, every single one of them has to contribute to the common meal to make the eruv, and then they can all carry from their houses to the courtyard and back. But if, let's say, one of them forgot to do it before Shabbat, so that his house is prohibited. That guy, he cannot take vessels from his house to the courtyard and back, but everyone else still can. In other words, you don't say just because one person didn't participate, that nullifies the whole thing. No, everyone else is still okay. We'll get to this issue much later. וכן שמעתי ממנו שיוצאים בעד הקרבלין בפסח, וחזרתי על כל תלמידיו וביקשתי להיכבד ולא מסרתי. A third law that Rabbi Eli heard in the name of Rabbi Eliezer is that you can use this certain type of lettuce for maror on Pesach. Okay, but he went to all of the Rabbi Eliezer students, and no, he couldn't find the corroboration. Notice he's the only one that remembers Rabbi Eliezer teaching this. No other student can remember that he taught this. And so, I guess that was lonely that he couldn't corroborate exactly these things. All right, so that's what these three items have in common, and why they're here, even though one of them does not have to do with eruv at all. Okay, so once again, just to quickly review the Mishnah, the first machloket was about the what items can be in it, right? You have to have a guard tower. His first opinion. Yehuda says no, only a well. Rabbi Akiva says you don't have to have anything at all, and it's still allowed. But all of them say 70 by 70. And then we talk about the shape. Rabbi Eliezer says it has to be rectangle. Rabbi Yosef says it can be. Rabbi Eliezer says square, and Rabbi Yosef says rectangle. And then we have these 3 traditions in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, very good. So now the Gemara has discussed this. When again, this is go back to our outline. First, the discussion of the word ve'od and where it's used and where it's not used. My tana de katani ve'od, right? Who is this referring to that it says and furthermore? Or why here? We know it's referring to the Yehuda ben Baba. Mishum de tana lechada lechumra ve'katani achariti. If you want to say in the previous Mishnah, he has a chumrah, right? What was that chumrah? He says only one of the 4 cases that you can use this. And here is another chumrah. So an additional chumrah, and by the same sage. It's fine, that makes sense. We have another case, which I'll show you here, in this Mishnah, one that we learned already, where you have the Yehuda twice. Or back to back, and it doesn't say ve'od. Here, the Yehuda says you can use you can use the paseh b'ra'ot up to bet sa'atayim, right? And then the rabbis tell him, no, you can't use up to bet sa'atayim. That's only said for other things, and was not said for paseh b'ra'ot. Okay, so that's one of Yehuda. And next Mishnah, the Yehuda says if many people pass through the well area, then it nullifies, right? Then you have to move the people to the side because the traffic turns it into its usage as a reshut harabim. So look, here you go. The Yehuda has 2 chumrot back to back. So how come you don't say ve'od, the Yehuda omer, right? If you always say ve'od, why not here? Okay. We're going to answer is that you see over here, Amru Lo is Chachamim responding to him and arguing with him. So you do have another opinion breaking it up, right? So perhaps because you have a response breaking it up, maybe that's why you don't say ve'od. So hatam afsekuh rabanan, hacha la afsekuh rabanan. In our Mishnah, right, that we just read, there's no opinion in between. I mean, we had a discussion between, but if you're learning Mishnayot, right, those are back to back. So that's why it says ve'od. All right, so that's so far so good. But now we're going to bring in another case from Masechet Sukkah. Is that true? Just because whenever you have interruption, then you don't say the word ve'od. I'll show you that example. Mishnah in the second perek of Sukkah, Rabbi Eliezer there says that you have to have 14 meals in the Sukkah, 2 every day of Sukkot. Okay, and the Chachamim say no, only one, only the first night. That's the halacha, right? The first night we're very careful, even if it's raining, we wait. which always try to make it the first night. Okay, so that's Rabbi Eliezer's first opinion. And then it says, "Ve'od amar Rabbi Eliezer," if someone was not able to eat the first meal, he can make it up later, right? He can make it up at the end of the holiday. And Chamim say, no, you cannot make up meals that you missed. So here, look, it says, Rabbi Eliezer, this was one, then it says, ve'od. And look, Chachamim interrupted. So even though Chachamim interrupt, you still say ve'od. So now, that coming back to here, right, you just said that if it says Chachamim interrupt, then you don't say ve'od. But this is a counter example. So you haven't given me a rule when we use it and when we don't. Okay, so no, where is the difference? Hatam b'milte hu de'afseku. Hacha b'mileta hariti afseku. There, in the case of Sukkah, the rabbis who interrupted were talking about the very same subject matter. How many meals do you have to have? He says 14, they say 1. Whereas in our case, meaning in the case of Rabbi Yehuda here, the rabbis who interrupt, they bring in other things. Agina, karpef, they're bringing in all kinds of other material, right, as a comparison point, but they're not directly talking about only the betzat time for paseh biraot. And so therefore it's a bigger interruption because they're bringing in other materials. So by the time we get to the next halacha, we already forgot, but it's not juxtaposed as immediately as in this case. Okay, good. So that's a general rule about ve'od. And so for homework, you can go search every ve'od in the Mishnayot and see if they all apply to this rule. Okay, and so now the next part, we're going to calculate the square root of 5,000, see how the Talmud does it. Rabbi Akiva omer afilu en ba echad mikol elu metaltelin betocha. Right, and you don't need anything else in it in order to be permitted to carry. You don't need a guardhouse or anything like that. Okay, Rabbi Akiva hainu tanak kama. So we ask, Rabbi Yehuda is the same as the Tanakh Kama. It's not clear who the Tanakh Kama is. Well, one opinion is that it's referring to a previous Mishnah, right, up here, that this Tanakh Kama, this Amru law, right, that we say Bet Satayim for Ganev Ganak Karpef. Whoever these Chachamim who spoke were, they say you need this 2 Satayim, which is 70 by 70, and they say it's good for Ganak Karpef and all that. And they don't say you need anything else in there. So it could be referring to that. Or perhaps more simply, it's talking about within this Mishnah, the Tanakh Kama is Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, who says that it's also 2 se'ah. Although they do disagree about whether you need a washman's booth or not, but the point of that, which was our question, right? Why the repetition of saying, as long as you have 70 by 70? The Tanakh Kama already said that. You don't need to add anything. Okay, so that I think that's a simpler way of understanding the Talmud's question here. And the answer is, Ika benayhu davar mu'at. The Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda omer, davar mu'at yesh al shivim amma b'shirayim velo natnu chachamim bo shi'ur. Okay, we have a baraita from Rabbi Yehuda that says that 70 times 70 is going to give you 4,900, right? It's still 100 short from 5,000. So it's a 70 and change. How much exactly is that change? The rabbis did not give a precise measure. Well, they wouldn't have, it would have been impossible for them to give a precise measure. I'm not sure if the Greeks at that time knew about irrational numbers or not, but they had some idea that it's impossible to formulate precisely. Okay, so just I'm going back to the Mishnah to show how we're reading it now. So that Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, he says it has to be 70 by 70, and so when he says that, he means even that extra, right? In other words, like exactly 5,000. You go and figure it out, measure it. Whereas Rabbi Akiva, when he says his statement, he means the 70 and 2/3 by 70 and 2/3. That's it. And even though you're missing a few square amot from that calculation, what? Yeah, it's close enough, but that's it. So in other words, he's a slightly more machmir. He's going by the estimation, and the first opinion is saying exactly, not the estimation. Okay, it's a difficult answer because the wording is exactly the same. There's no reason why to think to think that the Rabbi Akiva is any different from this opinion in terms of the measurement. So that's why that's why I provided to you before the historical explanation. Rabbi Akiva said his statement originally independently, and only afterwards Rabbi Yehuda Nasi took his statement and put it in order here, right, and adjusted the first half to respond to the Rabbi Yehuda, but did not adjust the second half because there's nothing wrong with it. It's just extra, sort of redundant. It does make it clear because maybe you would have thought that he's lenient on multiple aspects. No, it's only lenient on this. Okay, but in any case, the Talmud takes it this way, and we do learn something important, that this is a number that cannot be expressed with precision. Okay, good. Now, for the derivation, kama shiur sa'atayim kachasera mishkan, right? The measure of 2 bet se'ah, that was the size of the Mishkan, the courtyard of the Mishkan, which was 50 by 100. So that's where we learn it from. How do you know that the Mishkan is that big? Amar Rav Yehuda de kamar kera, right? Pasuk in end of Shemot, where all the instructions are. Orech chaser me'ah ba'ama, rochab hamishim ba'hamishim. So there you go. It's 100 by. This language is a little strange in the pasuk. Rochab, the width is 50 by 50. What do you mean 50 by 50? Just say 100 by 50, right? What's the 50 by 50? So we're going to give 2 explanations. One that will help us for this in this case, and one that's the pshat. This is the midrashic one. Amra Torah tol chamishim v'savev chamishim. Take 50, and the other 50 wrap it around. In other words, as follows: if you want to turn a rectangle into a square, right, with the same area, how do you do that? Okay, well, you have this 50 by 50. Leave that one alone. Now, this other one, split it up into 5 strips, and the last strip, split that into 5 sections, so you have 5 little squares. And then you take each strip and put it on each edge, right? And so you get 4 edges, and then take 4 of these little squares and put them in the 4 corners, right? Isn't that brilliant? And then this last one, just stretch it out as if it was just a third of an amah, right, by this would be 10 by 10, right? Each one of these is 10 by 10. That's 100 square amot. So instead of making it 10 by 10, make it 1 by 100. Make it a third by 300, right? Which would also still be 100 amot. And so that third by 300, take that and wrap it around here, right? And that's where you will get that little extra bit. And you end up with 70 plus some fraction added to that. Okay, good. So that's what it means. So when the Gemara, when the pasuk says chamishim b'chamishim, it means 50 around the 50, and then you get a square. Okay. Good. Now, that's a nice midrash, but that has nothing to do with the Mishkan. So, peshateh dikra b'ma'iketiv. What's the pshat of the mikra? The word peshat, we use it all the time as opposed to midrash, but it's used relatively rarely in the Talmud itself. And this is one of the places. And what does it mean? Lifshot means actually like to spread a tablecloth. You say lifshot. So it probably means context. Contextually, what does it mean? Right? The pasuk there is not talking about the size of an eruv for a vegetable garden. That's not the context, right? So maybe fine, you can use it for that, but it has to have an original meaning that fits the context. The context is Mishkan. So what does it mean regarding Mishkan? Amar Abaye, ha'amed Mishkan al sefat hamishim, kedei sheyeh hamishim amma lefanav, v'sim amma b'chol ruach. Here's a little picture of the Mishkan. So if you have, this is 100, so you take the 50, the midpoint, right, the 50 amma line, and that's where the Mishkan, the indoor part of the Mishkan starts. And it goes in one direction so that the Mishkan itself is 30 long, and so that you'll have 20 left over here, and you'll also have 20 on each side. So you have 20 on the perimeter, and this part is all 50 by 50. So in other words, the Torah is saying it's 100, and within that 100 is 50 and 50. Right? Those are the two outdoor section and the section that has the actual indoor part of it. The Kodesh is there. All right, very good. So now that's how we calculate, and that is the derivation. And so now we get to the last section of our discussion, which is mixed use land. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, imayta orka. If the length is greater than the breadth by 1 cubit, we didn't get to still a bit more about the shape. Vatanya Rabbi Eliezer Omer, imayta orka yater al pi shenayim berochba afilu ama achat and metaltelin betocha. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer says if the length is greater than the width, according to Rabbi Eliezer, even by 1 cubit is no good. It has to be exactly square. But we have another baraita, also in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, that he says, as long as it's not more than double the breadth, it's okay. So that means the same Rabbi Eliezer, here he says it can be rectangle. So this is a contradiction, but within Rabbi Eliezer's words. We have to solve it. Amar Bevai bar Abaye, ki tenan name matnitin yater al pi shenayim berochban tenan. Oh, the Mishnah, well, you have to correct the language of the Mishnah. Even in the Mishnah, you have to add those words. Didn't mean it has to be square exactly. It means it has to be that one side, this side, is not more than double this side. So now we brought the Mishnah in conformity with the Baraita. So that's good. We had the Baraita to correct the Mishnah, correct the language or our understanding of the Mishnah. All right, so now we have a question on that. Rabbi Yosef, in the Mishnah previously, in the same Mishnah, said that same thing, that the one side can't be more than double the other side. And now Rabbi Eliezer is saying the same exact thing. So now why, right, you have two opinions in the Mishnah, there's no machloket. Why mention both of them? There is a difference between them. There's two, she explains this as that according to the Yosef, square is preferable, but a rectangle is okay. But another, I think, it doesn't fit the word so well, but I think a better explanation is that offered by Rabbeinu Hananel, which is that according to the Eliezer, he's talking about the diagonal, that the diagonal cannot be more than double the AB side. All right, so that's in that case it would be prohibited. Whereas the Yosef is talking about this side. The side cannot be more than double the AB side. So there is still a difference between them when it says ribu'ah. In other words, the hypotenuse, somehow that means. Okay, so and that would be the difference between the two. All right. Now, right, if you use the hypotenuse, then that would be more machmir. It has to be a little bit squarer, right, in that case. Okay, good. So now we get to the mixed use. Rabbi Yosef Omer v'chule itemad amar Rav Yosef amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel halacha. That's the same lineage we had all the way in the beginning of the daf, right? Shmuel's telling us the halacha l'maaseh in all these cases. It says halacha keRabbi Yosef, Rabbi Vai amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel halacha keRabbi Akiva. There's also a name of Shmuel. Now these two are not contradictory because Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Akiva we're talking about two different subjects. Right? Remember, our Mishnah was a complex one. The Yosef was talking about the shape, and it could be a rectangle. Okay, good. And Rabbi Akiva was talking about that you don't have to have anything, a watchtower or anything else in it. So halacha is like that. So betalvaihu lekula, both of them are the lenient opinions. Uslicha, obviously I have to say both of them. Diashmeinan halacha Rabbi Yosef havamina adiika shomera o betira. If I only said halacha Rabbi Yosef, I would know, okay, it could be rectangle, but I would think maybe he does have to have a guard tower in it. So that's why I have to say halacha Rabbi Akiva. If I only had Rabbi Akiva, I might think it has to be square, and not if it's long and narrow, and therefore I have to tell me halacha is like Rabbi Yosef. Okay, in this case, it's quite obvious why you need both of them. But it seems like the structure of this sugya is like a template. Just like in the previous one, we needed it because they were actually overlapping, right? But in this case, you don't need to say it, but so we plug it into the template and show why they're both necessary. Good. Karpef shehu yoter mi bet sa'atayim shukaf ledira. Okay, now this is the new case. We're going to have. This is going to be the last case we're going to discuss today. What we're going to see is three different applications of it or interpretations of it. The first one we'll reject, but the second two are two possibilities. Okay, so we have a karpef, which is this courtyard that is more than 2 sa'atayim. And when I first built the wall, I had in mind that this would be for residential use. So it can be as big as I want. Okay, I'm going to walk around there. All right, I'm gonna hang out there. Good. Then after I did that, nizra rubo, then I went and I took seeds and I put seeds all over. Right, and now I turned it into a garden. Once it's a garden, you don't walk on your plants, right? So now I changed it. Now I'm no longer allowed to carry there. However, rather than planting vegetables, if I planted trees, then it's okay because trees are pleasant to walk. You walk around right under the trees, and it's shady and it's very nice, and so that is still considered a residential courtyard. If it's mostly trees. Good. So that's the statement that we're going to analyze. Now, nizra rubo. If most of it was planted. Amar Rav Yehuda bered Rav Yoshua lo maran ela yoter mi bet sa'atayim. Aval bet sa'atayim mutar. Okay, this only applies when you said here that if most of it is planted with vegetables, it's no longer allowed. That is only if it's more than 2 se'as within that courtyard. Let's say the courtyard is even bigger, right? It's 5 se'as. And I have 2 se'as of it, I turned into a vegetable garden, then it's no good. But if it's exactly 2 sa'atayim or less, then it would be okay. So if I only part of it, if it's a minority section of it, and it's less than 2 se'ah, then even though there's partly a vegetable garden, it's still okay. By the way, this is very practical because when we make an eruv around the whole area today, within that eruv are vegetable gardens and storage areas and places, right? All kinds of things. And so if you would have a majority of that, then it would be a problem. And so this is something that has to be careful with. Okay, so now what we are so far is that if you have just a small area, a minority, and less than 2 sa'atayim, that's a vegetable garden, that's okay. You can still carry in all of the rest of the area. Keman, Rabbi Shimon. This follows Rabbi Shimon. This is a Mishnah we're going to see much later in Masechet Eruvin Ditnan. Rabbi Shimon omer, Echad gagot, ve'echad haserot, ve'echad karpefot, reshut achat hen lakelim sheshabtu betochan, ve'lo lakelim sheshabtu betoch habayit. So Rabbi Shimon here is mekel compared to Chachamim. He says, let's say you have an area, an eruv, that has rooftops, courtyards, and non-residential yards. If you have utensils that were in any of these areas before Shabbat, you can carry them from one to the other. In other words, the different types of outdoor areas can be combined together, and you can carry from one to the other as long as these utensils were already outdoors and not if you brought them outside on Shabbat. Chachamim there say, no, you can't do that. Each area is its own thing. So now we're saying this follows Rabbi Shimon, because you just said that if one area is vegetable garden and the other area, that's the bigger part, is a regular courtyard, then you can carry among the whole thing. That follows Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so that's so far. That's what we're trying to say. But now we reject this. No, Rabbi Shimon nameh kevan denizra rubo haveahu mi'ota batel legabe ruba. No, Rabbi Shimon would not necessarily agree to that. He may very well say that once the majority of it is sown, then the minority part. Okay, going back, I think I said that the majority was not sown, right? But right now we're talking about a case where the majority is planted. So the majority that's planted will nullify the rest of it, and it means that I cannot carry in any section of it, right? And so that becomes as like a karpef that's more than 2 se'ah, right? You follow the majority, and therefore all this would be not be allowed according to the Bishimon. So therefore, there's no precedent for this opinion, this derivation that we had. So we're going to try a second derivation instead. Ela itmar hachi itmar. Rather, when Rav Huna derived before, he must have meant the following: hachi itmar ha miuta shareh. Oh, this means that if I planted most of it, right? So remember the case? I have a courtyard that I made for residential purposes, and and I'm allowed to carry the whole thing. Then I decided to come and I planted some vegetables in it, right? If I planted vegetables in most of it, it's not allowed. But if it's a minority of it, then it would be allowed. Okay, so this case is it's only a minority. And that's only if the minority is also 2 se'ah, is also less than 2 se'ah. But if it was exactly 2 se'ah or more, then it would not be allowed, right? So now we have a case where it has to be both less than 2 se'ah and a minority of the area is vegetables. Then I can carry among the rest, but otherwise not. So Keman, who does this follow? Like Rabbanan, the opposition of Rabbi Shimon before. Okay, and so this is a good possibility. And according to this, if it was exactly 2 se'ah, and a minority of the whole, let's say the whole thing is 5 se'ah, and I do exactly 2 se'ah, then I'm not allowed to carry, right? Less than 2 se'ah would be allowed. Okay, good. So that's all one version. That is one possibility. And now we have another version of this that is more lenient. According to this version, everything's exactly the same, except if it's exactly 2 se'ah, then it's permitted. Okay, so it's a very small difference between them. If it's exactly, everyone agrees that if it's a minority of the area and it's less than 2 se'ah, then it's okay. And everybody agrees that if it's more than 2 se'ah, or a majority of the area, then it's not okay. The machloket is only in this case of it's exactly 2 se'ah and the minority of the area. So let's see how he says it. Right, so therefore, if it's only a minority of it that you planted, it would be okay to carry in the whole thing. Right, so that's only if it's 2 se'ah. So more than 2 se'ah is not allowed, but 2 se'ah exactly, that would be okay. Keman Rabbi Shimon, and that would follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And we can, yeah. Where's the? Oh, we already passed the daf mark. Okay, so that's and the end of that discussion. I will continue tomorrow. Baruch Hanai L'olam. Amen. Amen. Thank you, everybody.